Seize the time, an old mantra used by the original Black Panther Party of Oakland, California, also seems to have its place within the designs of multimedia, namely the design of social engineering media and its dependence on the success of elaborate sets of entertainment propaganda. So what is social engineering media then? This is mainstream media, big budget Hollywood, mass publication sources, major network news and entertainment. There's professional sports, cable TV, internet TV, and the Internet of Things, and of course, the hive mind of social media. For these outlets and their billion-dollar global elite foundations, social engineering media is not simply big business with big payoffs. It is a simple means to shape and reshape society, position and reposition massive groups of people by manipulating, nudging along, and influencing. From hairstyles to fashion, even identity, worldview, or political affiliation, all of these areas are significantly affected and guided by influential personalities and characters manufactured through mass media outlets, proving that the majority of people today do not think for themselves or truly know themselves, nor really care to. Most of us just want to be force-fed how to be, what to pursue, what to support, and what to oppose. Takes less energy, less stress, less thinking, more time to consume, to gossip, and fulfill the endless and empty desires of the self. Hence, seize the time. While we play our best role of a mouse on a wheel, the media machine seizes every possible second to promise you a piece of cheese, or at least promise you the idea of one. And this is where imagination and the use of fantasy comes into play. What we can discover over the decades of post-World War II America is that media, politics, and public perspective, or the climate of society, has always been strategically interwoven with specific narratives that produce specific public reactions, and ultimately forge types of cultures and subcultures with in-group and out-group dynamics. We can see an example of this in Hollywood and its systematic use of socio-ethnic propaganda. Like during the Cold War of the 80s, we always got scary Russians in the movies. Or in the 90s, we were fed tons of plots with Arab terrorists, setting us up for 9/11. Or how today we always seem to get a spotlit token homosexual, anti-Christian sentiments, or desperate neoliberal scenarios in anything and everything you watch. Depending on the time or season, mass media outlets are geared to seize the moments at hand, spin them, and create a fitting piece of propaganda entertainment that matches the direction approved by the media elite and global think tanks. This is also why we find top executives of all media networks and publications on the board of the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, further describing the fraternal relationship between mass media and state-designed and funded social engineering, and more importantly, in terms of our current direction in 2018, global engineering. The collaboration of Agenda 21, transhumanism and biotech, blockchain technology and food source consolidation, weather and gene modification. All of these things, they all rely on a docile and weakened or debased society to properly develop. This is where the mass media takes up its role, the social engineering arm that will perfectly steer populations in the proper direction and produce the fitting cultures to maintain a secular technocracy, a direction set to fashion the global state system. And nothing controls people in their life in general more than their culture, so they control its production and capitalize on its influence and mass public acquiescence. Where did you think pop culture came from? What has seemed to bridge the gap between all ethnic cultures through globalization? Popular culture. Interestingly, no other population on Earth has had a bigger influence on popular culture than the so-called African American. Deeply spiritual by nature, talented and unique, African Americans have been the center of popular culture since it became a recognized concept. In fact, so-called blacks were the foundation of America's first original contribution to the world theater. This came directly out of America's first mass media performance art, blackface, of the early mid-19th century. This is found at greatest depth by the work of Eric Lott, who powerfully outlines the social relations of racial production at the beginning of blackface minstrelsy of 1820 to about 1840, highlighting the creation of a mainstream blackness as an American commodity. Yes, blackness as an American commodity, pre-Emancipation Proclamation. Blackface, though not technically a creation of black people, but inspired by, was the first prolonged featured appearance of black culture on the American stage, or any stage for that matter. Since these minstrel groups very quickly began to travel by boat on world tours, bringing this American blackness to the far stretches of the earth. What is important to mention here is that this misconception of blackness and farcical demonstration of a culture has lasted to present day and has continued to be used as not only empty entertainment, but a social engineering media source that literally creates real-life, tangible culture in response. According to James V. Hatch of the book Inside the Minstrel Mask, he states, first, that the stereotypes begun in the antebellum minstrelsy continued to flourish down through the 19th and 20th centuries. And second, that among the major carriers of these stereotyped images were later forms of popular entertainment, both live and recorded, that borrowed elements from the evolving blackface minstrel show. Among them, vaudeville, burlesque, the revue, and later, film, radio, and of course, television. Basically, what Hatch is saying here, and as a historical note, what we know today as American entertainment, from Hollywood to the music industry, came directly from the backfields of the antebellum era, gleaned and processed folk, song, and dance taken directly from the so-called black population. Hatch would go on to make a very important point when he stated, popular entertainments have great power. They tell us what is on the minds of ordinary people at any given moment, their concerns and biases and anxieties, and, in turn, refine them and restate them in a palatable, easily understood way. Hence, skillfully crafted and engineered mass media entertainment for the steering of the public perspective. For instance, we could assess a few specific stereotypical archetypes directly out of the blackface theater that still comprise a very large part of African American roles in film and genre projects over time. These archetypes have only emphasized weak, foolish, and moreover negative, exaggerated attributes and behaviors. There is the black buck, the zip coon, and the fiery sapphire. These characters represented themselves as the massive Hulk-like black man, sometimes a symbol of sexuality, other times of fear and violence, but always unintelligent and childish. Or the flashy dressing, quick talking, and moronic zip coon, overzealous and foolish. This is the stereotype the pimp was directly designed after. Lastly, the sapphire, or typical angry black woman stereotype. Lippy and obnoxious, or sensual and manipulative. She would knock you out if you said the wrong thing. This type of character was pretty much the only role available for many black women in Hollywood for some time, and still lingers to this very day. So it really isn't enough to say blacks have been used the most in the entertainment industry as mules and figures of influence. To be precise, so-called blackness and blackface comedy was the first authentically American form of mass entertainment to exist. Is it any surprise why we see no difference today? Just as we witnessed the historical formation of the Blaxploitation era of the early 70s, it has only continued in different formats and flavors, but the same elements of hedonism, narcissism, godlessness, and neoliberalism are ever present throughout. No morality, no dignity, and surely no Jesus. And it is the very nature of this type of entertainment, the debasement and hedonistic influence it has on its audience, that keeps it in heavy rotation and mass production over the generations. And today, during an MSM socially engineered race revival, we find intelligence agent groups like Black Lives Matter creating a media-induced faux new civil rights movement, or what now seems to be the new buzz term for the socially aware woke community. Here we find another media co-opted strain of popular culture, or mainstream culture that has now become a social norm and popular worldview of the public, opposed to, of course, its strategically engineered reactionary movements like the alt-right, alt-light, and these new nationalist identitarian movements. Haven't you noticed the new reactionary pro-white dialectic that has bubbled itself to the surface? The Red Ice Network is a good example of this. White ethno-state proponents on one side and black nationalism on the other side. Either cup of Kool-Aid they combined have been nothing short of a streamlined, divisive propaganda piece fresh off the presses, and now deeply embedded within the minds and hearts of a society. So not only can media debase culture sexually or morally, but it also has been used to divide culture politically. These are prime examples of how social engineering in mainstream media affects its given audience.
Struggle of the races, man's inhumanity to man, yet through it all, the shining hope of a new brotherhood, see?
Has gone base. I'm all alone. I'm all alone in this house. Isn't anybody else interested in upholding standards? Our world is coming crumbling down. The coons are coming.
Archie, 12% of the population is black. There should be a lot of black families living out here.
Yeah, this is only a beginning, but I think it's wonderful.
Wonderful, huh? Well, let's see how wonderful it is when a watermelon rinds come flying out the window.
Now, though the alt-right might immaturely whine and moan about new identity politics films like Black Panther, the neo-left will foolishly scream and rave about its significance and importance for the uplifting of black people. Yet, indeed, this allegedly uplifting and ego-stroking film is blaxploitation just the same. Even when ignoring the fact that it is a project of the global elite and property of Disney, we can still notice the false pride and magical thinking it produces in its audiences. Since when is it productive to run to Disney-produced fiction films based on comic books for children to glean self-worth, ethnic pride, or identity? What's worse is it's even being sold this way. Not as an exciting fictional action film, but a historical moment for all black people across the globe to learn from. As if Hollywood representation will help assist in the much-needed reform of multi-generational social engineering and cultural debasement. Sure. Just as negative behaviors can be exploited, so can perceived positive behaviors, like pride, and pride cometh before a fall. Or could it all be some dark joke esoterically saying the only chance Black America has at redemption is within a fantasy. It's an idea of fiction. When one realizes that true redemption can only be achieved through Christ, true understanding, true knowledge can only be found through God, well, it would only make sense that a key part of social engineering is to convince you otherwise, or just distract the world from making this discovery. Whether it's gratuitous sex and violence, aliens in outer space, fantasy, and the bottomless pits of the imagination, anything to keep you from the truth, anything to keep you following their lead, consuming their propaganda, shaping your identity in the process, and shaping your worldview around it. Though many might not want to admit it, the vast majority of us get our knowledge, identities, ambitions and fears, and overall points of view from mainstream media. Yes, most people today are a walking and talking super salad of a life raised on propaganda films, trashy pop music, engineered network news, decades of TV programming, smut and pornography, elite-approved pop literature and textbooks in education, mass publication magazines, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, and so on. The most gripping aspect of all of this brutally true reality is that every single one of these sources are controlled by a centralized organization of families, foundations, and think tanks. Think about it. Oh, but this is a great day for Black America. Finally, Hollywood turns the tables, people say. Like we all just totally forgot about the blockbuster work of Black superhero Spawn. Not to mention the infamous series of Black superhero Blade. Oh, but those films didn't play into the identity politics propaganda of 2018, I guess. But please proceed. Run to the Disney Corporation for ethnic esteem. As if the powers that should not be would have any interest in your best interests. The whole idea of even thinking corporate media or corporate anything has a consumer's well-being in mind is beyond naive at this point. The world is much more than a business, Mr. Beale. It's a factory. How about we add on with this idea? In such a progressive and socially aware day and age, we see an end to all the negative and stereotypical skeletons of America's closeted past, especially those of minstrelsy and the Blaxploitation era. I mean, these eras represent the lowest points for Black people. If the media elite truly had the social development of Black people in mind, surely they would put an end to this type of lowly and negative representation that has been so generationally typical, right? But sure enough, and right in line with all that which is required of social engineering media, the debasement of culture, not development of culture, Sony Pictures has recently beat out Warner Brothers Group to remake the groundbreaking or culture-breaking film Superfly. Right when one thinks this neoliberal social justice warrior mainstream media takes a vow to end Black oppression and expose its persecutors, it rolls out a remake of arguably the worst film that ever happened to the Black population. And for whatever steps forward one wants to believe this whole Black Panther, Black Lives Matter, don't shoot, I can't breathe, me too, we too, hashtag revolution in your pocket has taken, well, I suggest you take all them steps back slowly and with your hands behind your head. Because as expected, and in tandem, back they are bringing the old Zip Coons and Bucks and Sapphires and blackface characters to the big screen. Must we really equate the lifestyle of drugs, sex, and violence to blackness once again? Well, according to history, it has been no other way. Hence our endless examples of modern-day 21st century minstrelsy entertainment. So it only makes sense that the MSM would release the remake of this culture-debasing film Superfly, right in the center of such a politically and racially charged period. Reviving and re-educating the so-called black, as well as all the others who are in the audience, reliving the nightmare, a new indoctrination of an old form of propaganda media. See, social engineering is cyclical, a set series of ebbs and flows, tragedy and laughter. Yes, pain and pleasure. Psychological masochism has become the foundation of what America views on a daily basis. Mass media is a source of trauma-based mind control that maintains a pickle within your mind. Consistent imbalance, half-truths, massive lies, and a tickle for every fancy, a tear for every tragedy. Media stagecraft brought to you strategically by the most powerful oligarchs in the world.